If you're at all familiar with, I don't know, 95% of my content at this point prior to watching this video, first of all, welcome. It's really, really nice to see you. And also, you can absolutely guess what my first Fudge The Numbers review will be. Well, I guess you don't have to guess because it's in the title of the video, but even if it wasn't, you could have guessed it would be Monster Hunter Wilds at its current state. And yes, I will be doing another one for its expansion too. So I'm here to answer the ultimate question: who would actually enjoy a game like Monster Hunter Wilds? I'm personally not the type of guy that needs a super compelling narrative to enjoy a game, given other things in the game are done properly. That's not to say that the Wilds narrative is not compelling, with fully voice-acted cutscenes in multiple languages, likable characters for more reasons than just one, and actual named NPCs. If Wilds is your first Monster Hunter game, you really don't know how good you have it. Named NPCs, full voice acting, all of which are rather new to the franchise. I mean, the effort they put into the game, story included, is palpable, even if the strength of the narrative is really somewhat of a backdrop for the rest of what the game has to offer. You're gonna make me talk about the story? Yeah, you're right. I said this would be thorough or whatever. Okay, fine, but I'm not gonna spend more time on it than the game did, and you're only in the story for like 10% of the playtime, it feels like. Okay, I'll do it. The story actually is solid, especially if you're an old head and a lore nerd. I mean, the game at points almost feels like fan service to those who've been paying close attention. The tasteful kind. Okay, and I guess the not so tasteful kind too. You'll probably find a lot of people online not caring for the story, but to be honest, I really enjoyed that they tried so hard with it. And not only that, there are some really cool things that are possible now because of the narrative decisions they made. Without giving any spoilers, because, I don't know, maybe you care. Monster Hunter has a rich lore, and the developers take care of never truly abandoning it, or at least reminding us in increasingly larger ways that they still care for that aspect of the game, even if only recently it's been focused on to this extent. You have to remember, Monster Hunter as a franchise is 2 decades old, so it really wasn't always like this, and honestly, it wasn't even close. The voice acting is solid. The people we hear talking the most don't have annoying voices or dialogue, at least I don't think so. And if you don't like your feline companion or a palico speaking in actual words, you can always just turn that off. I personally bang with it, but hey, they give you options for a reason. All in all, even if I tend to enjoy the story, like all the games, it's such a background element that you may be left wanting if you really love a game that's entirely narrative driven. Even so, they make an effort to give us a reason for all the carnage, and I can appreciate that much. Still, the challenge of the story mode is relatively low, especially in comparison to what the game becomes. One of my biggest criticisms of Wilds is actually the story mode, and not the writing itself or the characters, but I earnestly believe it doesn't prepare you much, if at all, for the later challenges of the game. It gets you excited to see the next monster, sure. And it even forwards the general man vs. nature narrative Monster Hunter consistently hits on pretty elegantly. But boy, do you really blow by these monsters. I feel like it's important to note that I'm an above average player with above average experience with the franchise, so just because I think the story isn't that much of a challenge doesn't mean that everyone's experience will be the same. Regardless though, the game gets so much harder come mid-late to end game, there's really not much to properly prepare you for that 8 to 10 star tempered and arc-tempered grind. You just have to get smoked and get better. Monster Hunter historically is a game where you always get your butt handed to you one way or another, but in Wilds that may just come a little later in the game than you're used to, especially if you're very familiar and experienced with the franchise. It's probably pretty obvious that monsters are an enormous part of this series, given it's quite literally 50% of the franchise title. Monsters are damn near 50% of the entire Monster Hunter experience. I'll say one of the things that's drawn me to the franchise as a whole has been my weakness for atmosphere in the games I play. Scope, magnitude. Monster Hunter has always been so excellent at giving these larger-than-life creatures their own personalities, ecosystems, soundtracks. I mean, look, if you play this game and maybe you're the type of guy that likes background noise, so you've got YouTube running in the background or something, or music, try putting on a good pair of headphones and partaking in a hunt. The score, the sound design, the camera, I mean, it is truly an absolute spectacle. Wilds also brings an entirely new type of monster into the fold, cephalopods, which is not only an extremely unique and refreshing body type of monster, but it shows that the team is getting increasingly more comfortable with those serpentine and fluid animations in their monsters. All incredibly good news to me, especially since we were sorely lacking our slithering buddies in World, and haven't even seen Snake Wyverns return since their debut in 4th gen. If you ask me, I think they're practically guaranteed in the Wilds expansion, but this is not the video for that. On top of that, we have some extremely well-regarded, slightly more conventional new monsters like Raidao, Arkveld, Deshagama, and everyone's favorite toady punching bag, Chotacabra. A lot of people say that Wilds has one of the strongest base game rosters of the entire franchise, and I honestly can't help but agree. I mean, seriously, how can you see Raidao and not immediately want to see him in action? Like, really, be for real for a second. The atmospheric splendor continues in where the hunts tend to take you. I know we already talked about the story, but I want to return to it just briefly to discuss another criticism. You actually spend a lot of time in the story mode during the times of fallow or inclemency, 2 of the 3 environmental patterns each locale can exist in, where the colors are washed out and a bit more drab. The fact that the colors are more drab during these times alone isn't a criticism. In fact, I think it's a strength of the game. But it's true that story mode feels like you are never seeing the lighting Wilds has to offer, and that's a true shame, because when you get to see it, yo, that RE engine and what it can do with lighting, dude, I'm telling you. You heard me say that statement before, that those color drain moments are a strength of the game, and I say that because of how it interacts with the Time of Plenty, the 3rd environmental pattern marked by increased foliage and endemic activity. Something about fighting a high-level Mizu or Uthduna at night while it's pouring down in the Scarlet Forest, then the rain stops as the day comes and the sun crests over the waterfall you're running alongside because the clouds broke to reveal the Time of Plenty. Like, the fact that you can get that amount of atmospheric depth from just your average random hunt is a huge positive aspect of the artistic vision of the game. While I'm on the topic of locales and maps, I do enjoy them, but you may well hear a criticism or two that they feel a bit empty in comparison to previous titles. And while that feels a bit nostalgia biased to me, I think I understand where they're coming from. See, these larger interconnected maps we have in Wilds are new to the franchise, at least to this scale. And as of right now, the fact that they're interconnected is pretty much useless, since you're often fast traveling around using camps and whatnot. In previous games, the locales were smaller, and while still artistically and atmospherically magnificent given their technological limits, exploration was much more intentional because it had to be slower and less guided. There were no mounts, so nothing was taxiing you anywhere. Since you have your trusty Sacred that can auto-travel, you may well feel like that's a pretty robotic way to explore even larger locales. Sure, I think that's valid. But also, exploration actually never felt like a focal point of the franchise to me. It's true that narratively you may be technically exploring a region, but not only did locales used to be much smaller, but there were loading zones between each section of the locale. Further, you are only ever in a locale for just about 2 reasons in this franchise: hunting or gathering. Both of those things rely on knowing where things are, absolutely, and the way to find out where those things were, monster or gathering material, you just meandered around, looked it up, or used a psycho serum if we're talking about monsters, or maybe waved at a balloon, again if we're talking about monsters. Maybe these things were super compelling to a lot of people who started with those classic titles like myself, but even if that's the case, Monster Hunter has never been about the tracking or not knowing where blue mushrooms were until you found them after sitting through 7 loading zones only to be hit out of your gathering animation by an eye of prey or something. I mean, let's face it, we didn't get an actual formal tracking system until the game went to the big leagues internationally and world, so it couldn't have been this integral part of the game from the get-go. Still, if you're the type of person that really loves deep and free exploration, not only is Wilds probably not the game for you, I may argue that the entire franchise may not be for you, because it's just not this heavily explorative game. That's not where the consistent strengths lie, in my opinion. You'll find a secret area that has unique gathering items in literally all of the games. That's not changed, and finding those secret zones or maybe places you can parse out some lore is certainly intentional by the developers. But that aspect really hasn't gone anywhere, even if you can elect to taxi yourself to a selected location via Sacred, which, by the way, you never have to do. You can always use them manually and just explore on foot or mounted if you want. Again, I don't mean to say these criticisms are necessarily invalid, but more so that there are likely better and more pertinent reasons to play this game other than tracking and not knowing where you are or where you're going. Believe me, I get it. There's excitement in finding a thing you've been looking for in those old games, but that excitement tends to be quickly overtaken by the excitement of hunting the thing, or taking the item back home and crafting with it, because that's probably closer to what the game is about anyway. Still not done talking about the art and atmosphere though, because the design elements of the nature and monsters alone aren't the only impressive parts of Wilds, or of the franchise as a whole for that matter. The armor designs and fashion, which is a genuine consideration of mine, especially when I'm playing anything RPG adjacent, is absolutely f***ing spectacular. The fashion is so strong in Wilds. In fact, there are names for the particularly stylish in the franchise: fashion hunters. I mean, hell, the developers themselves put an entire side quest in Wilds where you make a set of armor, one piece from a few different sets, to partake in a fashion show. I mean, truly, the equipment designs in Wilds are almost second to none, and it's only up from here. Last but certainly not least for this section, the character creator in Wilds is very, very strong. They give you a tremendous amount of options. You can easily create a hunter of color that has those ethnically and culturally relevant features. And while they could certainly use more representative hairstyles, I'm impressed with the state of character creation as it stands. It's clear they paid a lot of attention to detail and personal expression, so much so that they've even removed gender-locked armors. So if you want to be a burly masculine hunter that wears femme armor, or a slender feminine hunter that wears masculine armor, or anywhere in between, have at it. The world is your oyster. Or the Wilds is your oyster, I guess. Buckle up for this one, because this section is likely going to be the longest one. Monster Hunter as a whole are actually pretty straightforward games. That's not to say that it's easy or even simple. No, but your goal is very straightforward for the most part. Hunt the monster, or sometimes capture it. In this iteration of the game, we have 14 weapon types, each of them unique, give or take some overlap here and there, which I think really can't be helped. This isn't specific to Wilds as opposed to just the franchise in general, but Monster Hunter has, in my opinion, always been a game of boundary pushing, a game of more. You'll find people scattered across the dark underbellies of online forums trying to convince you precisely what the heart and soul of Monster Hunter is, commonly with this template. I remember when Monster Hunter had, insert mechanic here, that's when it was real. Now it's not grounded enough. Yeah, I rebuke that. In fact, I rebuke any argument for the health of Monster Hunter that centralizes groundedness or sameness to a previous entry. Each iteration of the game comes with big and small changes because each iteration of the game pushed the boundaries left by the previous entry. Monster Hunter doesn't copy off anyone else's homework. No, they come up with a new assignment each and every time. And as a result, it's practically impossible to say Monster Hunter is any one thing consistently other than slaying the monster. That's pretty much the one and only through line of every single game. So it's important to ask ourselves how it feels to do that in this title. Well, let me be the first one to tell you here, or probably not the first one. Monster Hunter Wilds to me feels like the most compelling hunting of any of the games. And for me, it's not even that close. Listen, I probably lost some people. I hear you. The beginning of the game feels too easy, our hunting times are too low. Seriously, I get that. But God, how it feels to swing your weapon around in that game, the combos, the responsiveness, and subsequent changes to the monsters as a result, feels like we are witnessing in real time the development team get closer and closer to realizing their true vision for this franchise, whatever the hell it may be. Wilds introduces a controversial, apparently, mechanic to the game that really shakes things up. The ability to aim where your weapon strikes during startup animations or walking animations with your weapon out. If you have absolutely no clue at all what Monster Hunter is, the fact that I called this edition controversial may really make your eyebrow raise. And even as an old head, I find the amount of niche discontent I see for this edition so profoundly perplexing. I mean, I will genuinely find people saying the ability to aim your weapon has fundamentally ruined the franchise. And to those people I say, you were probably never really true fans anyway. You just liked a couple of the games and you should play them. They still exist. Let those of us who are into Monster Hunter for its innovations be impressed with those innovations. I'm not saying you have to like the new games, but I am saying that the reason you don't like the new games isn't necessarily because they're not Monster Hunter games anymore. It's because you have an aversion to people making large innovations to a formula you got very comfortable with and spent a lot of time with. I'll talk more about this later. To return to the topic, focus mode does not merely allow you to aim your attacks, which naturally shifts the game's balance to allow monsters to have more mobility and agility into their increasingly complex movesets, but it also ups the already mechanically complex nature of Monster Hunter as a whole by introducing focus strikes. Think of focus strikes like special attacks performed on a particularly weak spot of a monster, known as wounds or weak spots. They do more damage than your standard attack, each weapon has a different one, and they all play into each weapon's moveset somewhat differently, and they look utterly fantastic. Along with the power fantasy of honing in on a weak spot you've created or sought out and doing incredible damage to it, Wilds has taken care to improve on the interplay between monster and hunter. Like I said before, Monster Hunter has always been a boundary pusher in a lane of its own, but that doesn't mean such innovation didn't come with growing pains, if you want to call them that anyway. I feel like a better turn of phrase would be, you can see the developers maturing their game as they themselves mature as creators of the art. On an even more fundamental level than graphics or hitboxes or amount of monsters, how each monster interacts with the hunter has gotten more complex release after release, and Wild certainly feels like some sort of culmination. The movement in the game is beautiful and fluid from both the monsters and the hunters. While I don't really like drawing direct comparisons to previous Monster Hunter titles, if you're wondering if the combat is more like Rise or World, the answer is neither. It's somewhere in between insofar as pace is concerned, which I personally enjoy. Monsters feel like they spend less time ambling around between attacks or kinda awkwardly shuffling and repositioning as they slip into their next attack animation, which only ups the ante for me. Your decisions per second, if that's even something people say, is fast, and I love fast-paced action in video games where each individual action seems relevant. Monster Hunter has always been good at this, but it seems like now they're mastering it. Defensive and offensive options feel strong and responsive when it comes to the vast majority of weapon types. The only reason I'm not saying for all of the weapon types is because I don't play all of them, just 11 or so out of the 14. But of those 11, which is everything except light bowguns, lance, and heavy bowguns, I think what I said stands. The addition of offsets, guard clashes, and perfect dodges are satisfying and rewarding, especially when you really learn how to implement all of them smoothly into your combat. Monsters feel like they're fighting more to their biological strengths because of how impressive their movesets have become. So, monster identity during the fight feels more expressive in a lot of ways. Because of a lot of these changes and improvements in my eye, the skill ceilings for weapon mastery and certainly monster mastery come late game especially feels higher. Mind you, this is only a base game with a massive expansion fresh on the way. Another part of the gameplay loop within the Monster Hunter franchise, Wilds included, is build crafting. Some people may think generally the practice is for sweats, but there are levels to it, and if you're not doing any of it at all, well, they're missing out on at least a quarter of the game. And, let's face it, you're probably a scourge to your SOS hunts. So I hope you're playing solo if you don't want to mess with a build, or you're just real good. Your armor comes with skills, and on top of that, slots of different types and levels so you can add more skills via little gems called decorations, or decos for short. Unique to Wilds comes offensive and defensive skills and slots, so there's some limitations on what types of decos can go into certain slots. If I'm honest with you guys, I've only heard people say negative things about this change, otherwise people seem to be quietly ambivalent at the very worst. As someone that plays a lot of different weapon types, I actually think it's really convenient to tie weapon-specific skills to the weapon itself, so all I have to do in a lot of instances is swap my weapon out and my build still makes sense. But I generally understand why limitations like this are annoying, especially if you're a min-maxer. You really want to put that extra attack or crit boost on, but of course you get less offensive slots than defensive slots because you're only carrying one weapon with their effective slots at a time, with a max of 3 slots, whereas you're wearing 5 pieces of armor that may all have defensive slots on them. I totally get that. I don't think it's reason enough to not buy or play the game, but maybe they'll relax this or get rid of the separation altogether if enough people dislike it. For me personally, it doesn't affect how I enjoy the game, and build crafting still feels fun and effective, even though it's certainly grindy. Speaking of the grind, this is another integral aspect to Wilds, and you will again hear criticisms about it, but if you ask me, they're kinda bogus. Not because you have to like repetition or you have to like a grind, but saying Monster Hunter has too much grind is like saying a beach has too much sand. Right? Like, if you didn't want sand, then why'd you book the flight to Cozumel? You know, like, I don't understand that. Monster Hunter has actually always, and I mean literally always, asked you to spend tons of time repeatedly fighting the same monsters for the things that you want. The only thing that's changed is the fact that some of those things are tied to more instances of RNG, or random number generator, which is commonly what people are annoyed about. They want a really specific role and they're annoyed that they can't get it. And while I generally understand it's obnoxious to not get exactly what you want, the RNG aspect of the late game grind would only be critically annoying if you needed any of the super uncommon or rare stuff to be a true threat in the game or get great hunt times. You really don't at all. There's in fact no content in Monster Hunter Wilds, or maybe even any Monster Hunter that I've played, that you need to rely on the most obnoxious of RNG to enjoy the game. Monster Hunter is not a game you need to min-max in to be effective. No, you mostly just need to be skilled. Still, it's only fair I tell you if you're not aware, it's a grindy game, for sure, with RNG elements for some of the most potent endgame equipment. I want to give this section a little preface as well because this entire franchise is really important to me and I'm aware of the sentiments around the great shift from 4th generation, ending with Generations Ultimate, into 5th gen starting with World and ending with Rise. You heard me a bit earlier in this video speak about the fans of the old games and some of their disdain for the newer games, and I just want to flesh that out a bit more. I also mentioned earlier that some of the Monster Hunter community will try to convince you what the essence of Monster Hunter is, and then try to convince you exactly when that essence was lost, which I think is troublesome for a few reasons. I think the biggest reason is because y'all aren't the devs, so you can only tell us what you personally liked about some of the games. And even then, I think for the most part, people are conflating nostalgia with quality, which is neither here nor there. Like what you like. I truly believe there is only one major consistency between each and every generation of Monster Hunter, and it's the fact that the game innovates almost drastically, and in fact, sometimes within the same generation the innovations are drastic. Hell, maybe even most of the time they are. That's all. The thing that links all Monster Hunters together is the fact that they are not consistently the same. Each game allows us to do more, and that's been the case quite literally since the 1st generation game into the 2nd generation. Ugh. Speaking of 2nd generation, I actually may have told a slight lie when I said there's only one consistency between each generation of the game. There are actually two. The first being innovation, and the second being people complaining about innovation. Maybe you're really new to the franchise and hear people talk about how the old games are marked by the loading screens and the chance to fail crafting and the paintballs and the whatever. And it almost makes them sound like the general consensus is that the game was on a constant upward trajectory until the cataclysm that was Monster Hunter World. But what if I told you every single time a new Monster Hunter comes out, a vocal minority calls it too easy because we can do more things? Do you think you'll ever hear people calling Monster Hunter Freedom Unite easy now? Of course not. But that's not because people didn't think it was too easy. No, they did. Every single new generation of Monster Hunter gets the same exact criticisms from this group. There are changes, and now it's become a laughable cakewalk, and that laughable cakewalk is always during the former half of the game. Sure. What if I told you that Monster Hunter was actually never made with difficulty in mind? Not that I would know, but instead it was just made with monster killing in mind. In fact, what if I told you that the actual essence of Monster Hunter is the innovation in combat and empowering the hunter? And before you ask who I am to say that, well, I'm a recognizer of patterns. It's fine to be critical, but maybe some people are just, I don't know, missing the point. It's always been about more, and it's never been about less. Or more of the same, for that matter. In fact, to be honest with you, I was so into Monster Hunter for the innovations, I actually stopped playing after 3rd gen when I found out 4th gen would be on handhelds, because I earnestly believed the ideas the franchise were going for were already outgrowing the small screen after and during 3rd gen. So of course imagine my rampant excitement when World was announced. I'm actually doing a playthrough of Generations Ultimate now, and it's extremely fun. I think critics of the modern games are onto something when they talk about locale exploration. I found a little hidden honey spot I had to crawl to get to in the verdant hills, and it made me go, oh, nice, more honey. Which is not something I find myself saying in WoW, it's because there's more honey to be found and it's easier to find. And, well, the game isn't called Honey Hunter, so around 3.5 seconds later after I said, oh, nice, more honey, I said, okay, time to hunt this monster. It's not that I don't hear your criticisms, guys, it's just, they don't really sway me. Okay, so I went on and on about the game, and you can probably tell I hold the game in very high regard. I certainly do. But in my opinion, you're not a fan of anything if you can't bring yourself to criticize it. Of course, I've already criticized it previously, but I have more. While I think the most core aspects of the franchise are really impressively improved upon from previous entries, there are some things I feel like are truly lacking in Wilds, and that's well, everything else. You heard me mention before that Monster Hunter is a game that's primarily about what the title suggests, killing you some monsters. And while I think that's fantastic in Wilds, all of that fun, neat, extraneous stuff we get that really fleshes out the universe feel distinctly lacking here. I know all the World glazers are going to turn their dislikes into likes after this one, but World did something really special with the locales they made. Not merely because of how fantastic they looked, but because the game forced you to explore them in some manner. There were Grimalkine tribes around, and your Palico could get side quests from them and learn new abilities and skills. You were forced to find tracks that brought you all around the map to find the monster you were hunting or investigating. There were just more things to do on the side that weren't merely swinging your weapon around. There were also things to find. Not only that, in other Monster Hunter titles we had great ways of creative self-expression, with houses you could put your endemic life in and show others. We had ways to passively get materials by utilizing other side quests to enhance aspects of the village or town we were in. In so many of the Monster Hunter games there was always that something else. Whether it was Poke Farm and Freedom 2, all the way to the Argosy submarines and Meowcenaries and Rise, there was commonly that something else. Now that's not to say there's nothing else in Wilds at all. We have barrel bomb bowling and a very watered down Argosy that brings a shop to you every few in-game day cycles, and you can get some villagers you meet to collect certain materials for you, but that's really it. No houses yet, nowhere to put your endemic life you collect, nothing to do with our Palico to further upgrade it or implement it further into the game, no passively getting unique materials by using, say, another Palico, none of it. I understand that this is a base game, and they likely put so much effort elsewhere they had to cut back on some things to accommodate, kinda like they did in Try with the implementation of underwater combat, which made the developers shrink the amount of weapon types available from the 11 in 2nd gen to a staggering 7. Could you imagine if they tried something like that now? Yeah, it wouldn't go over. Regardless, those things truly feel like they're missing. And the fact that I can feel their absence in a negative way makes me believe they should truly always be a part of the franchise in bigger, more relevant ways than they currently are in Wilds. I have a lot of faith they'll be adding more of those extraneous aspects in the upcoming Master Rank expansion, and sure enough if they do, I'll be praising that. But for now, I can only talk about how much I miss them, and how much I think the game is sorely missing them too. I want to briefly discuss performance because for some that may be a true issue, though for me it never was. And yes, I have exclusively logged my 2,000 plus hours in Wilds on PC. I have a strong machine, so that makes sense, and they have done tremendous amounts of improvements on PC stability, so I want to confidently say it's not much of an issue anymore. If it is, feel free to flame me in the comments. Still, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least inform you guys that you may need some sort of strong machine to run the game if you're playing it on PC. The game is entirely cross-platform, so you can get it on whatever you want and still play with whoever you want. I get that the ability to run the game is important for, playing the game, but whether or not you personally can run the game doesn't change my opinion on the game presuming it runs properly, so take that for what you will. In summary, I think Monster Hunter Wilds is a game you should certainly pick up if you enjoy fast-paced, responsive, weighty combat with a surplus of weapon options and playstyles. If you enjoy inventive and intense creature designs, this is definitely a game and franchise for you as well. If you enjoy the aspect of getting better at video games and improving on muscle memory, dexterity, and skill set as opposed to just getting strong enough equipment to blow past your enemy, you may really enjoy Wilds and just about every other Monster Hunter. I didn't mention this really at all during the other parts of the video because I'm more of a solo player for the most part, but Monster Hunter is a very cooperative game, so if you enjoy not only satisfying progression but doing it with a buddy or three, Wilds is certainly the game for you, and any Monster Hunter game for that matter. Players that prefer narrative-driven titles where the story is the primary piece throughout the game's runtime, like God of War, may be disappointed. If you really don't have lots of time and wouldn't prefer a game that's somewhat of a time sink, you also may want to wait until you have more time before you pick this one up. Also, if you love a game where you can be very personal with your character and make them look pretty much exactly how you want, personal expression is a strong aspect in Wilds and I think should be celebrated and genuinely may be something consumers are looking for in their video games. I know I am. All in all, this is truly shaping up to be my favorite Monster Hunter game, and I've been a big time fan since Freedom 2 back on PSP, so it's not like I'm brand new here. Thank you guys so much for sitting here and watching my first game review. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and I hope that this helps someone make an informed decision on whether or not they want to pick the game up. Until next time, seriously, I mean this. Fuck the numbers.